The woman collapsed against the rough-hewn door frame just as thunder cracked overhead, her dress clinging to her body like a second skin, water pooling at her feet on the weathered porch boards. Mason Steele had been cleaning his rifle by lamplight when the desperate pounding started, and now he stood frozen for half a heartbeat, taking in the sight of this stranger who looked like she had been dragged through hell and the Green River both. Without a word, he grabbed her arm and pulled her inside his cabin, kicking the door shut against the driving rain that had turned the April night of 1878 into something fierce and unforgiving. "Jesus Christ, woman, what happened to you?" His voice was rough from days of riding alone, checking fence lines across his spread just outside of Anston, Wyoming. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, unable to form words, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. Mason could see she was young, maybe 20 or so, with the kind of face that would be beautiful if it was not currently the color of milk and twisted with cold and fear. He did not wait for an answer. Years of living alone on the frontier had taught him that sometimes action mattered more than words. He guided her to the chair nearest the stone fireplace, then moved with practiced efficiency to build up the fire. The coals from his earlier flame still glowed red, and he added kindling, then larger pieces of split pine, blowing on it until flames licked upward. The heat would take a few minutes to really penetrate the room, but it was better than nothing. "I need to get you out of those wet clothes or you will catch your death," he said, turning back to her. Her eyes went wide with alarm, and despite her condition, she tried to pull away. Mason held up both hands. "Easy now. I am not that kind of man. I will get you a blanket and turn my back. You can change yourself, but you cannot stay in those soaked things." He moved to his bedroom, a small space separated from the main room by a simple curtain, and returned with 2 wool blankets and one of his own shirts. It would hang on her like a tent, but it was clean and dry. "Here. I will stand over by the window with my back turned. You holler when you are decent." Mason walked to the far side of the room and stared out at the rain sheeting down, his mind racing through possibilities. A woman alone, soaked from the river, showing up at his door in the middle of the night. Nothing good led to that. He had built this life carefully over the past 8 years, saving his wages from cattle drives until he could buy this land, carving out a small ranch that was finally starting to turn a profit. The last thing he needed was trouble. "Okay," came a small voice behind him. He turned to find her wrapped in the blankets, sitting as close to the fire as she could get without climbing into it. Her wet clothes lay in a sodden heap on the floor. He scooped them up and draped them over a chair near the hearth to dry. "What is your name?" he asked, pulling another chair closer and sitting down where he could see her face. Up close, even in her bedraggled state, she was striking. Green eyes that reminded him of new spring grass, fine bones, a stubborn set to her jaw even now. "Anna," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Anna Kincaid. Mason Steele. This is my ranch, small operation, but it is mine." He studied her carefully. "You want to tell me how you ended up in the Green River at night in a rainstorm?" Anna pulled the blankets tighter, and he saw something flash across her face. Fear, but also calculation. She was deciding what to tell him, how much truth to share. Mason had played enough poker to recognize the look. "I was running," she finally said. "From my uncle. He owns the general store in town. After my father died last year, I went to live with him and my aunt. He seemed kind at first." She swallowed hard. "He is not kind." Mason felt his jaw tighten. He could read between those lines easily enough. "He hurt you," he wanted to. Anna met his eyes directly now, some steel entering her voice despite the shaking. "Tonight he came to my room drunk, saying it was time I showed proper gratitude for his hospitality. My aunt was visiting her sister in Fort Bridger. I ran. He chased me. The only way to lose him was to go through the river. I did not realize how high it was running until I was already in it. The current took me downstream almost a mile before I could get out. I saw your light from the road. Charles Kincaid is your uncle. Mason knew the man by reputation, a businessman who had come to Evanston 5 years back and quickly established himself as one of the more prosperous merchants. He had always struck Mason as oily, too quick with a smile and too interested in turning a profit. But Mason had never heard anything to suggest he was the kind of man who would force himself on his own niece. Anna nodded miserably. He will look for me. He cannot afford to have me telling people what kind of man he really is. Mason stood and walked to the window again, thinking hard. Outside, the storm showed no signs of letting up. Even if he wanted to ride into town tonight to confront Charles Kincaid, which he did not, the roads would be thick with mud, and the river would be impassable where it crossed the main road. "You can stay here tonight," he said, making the decision even as he spoke. "Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next, but right now you need to get warm and get some rest. You can have my bed. I will sleep out here by the fire." "I cannot put you out of your own bed," Anna protested, but he waved her off. "I have slept in worse places than a chair by a warm fire." "Come on, you can barely keep your eyes open." He was right. Now that the immediate danger had passed and warmth was seeping back into her bones, exhaustion was hitting her like a hammer. He guided her to the bedroom, lit the lamp on the small table, and pulled back the quilts on his bed. "Get some sleep. We will talk more in the morning." Anna climbed into the bed, and Mason could not help but notice how small she looked surrounded by all that fabric. "Thank you," she said softly. "I did not know where else to go. You came to the right place." He meant it, though he had no clear idea yet what he was going to do with a runaway woman who had every right to be running. He pulled the curtain closed and returned to the main room, feeding more wood into the fire and settling into the chair with one of the blankets. Sleep did not come easily. His mind kept turning over the problem. If what Anna said was true, and he had no reason to doubt her, then Charles Kincaid was the worst kind of predator. But men like that were often the most dangerous when cornered, and Evanston was not a large town. Word would spread fast that Anna had shown up at his door. People would talk. Some would believe her story, but others would side with the respectable merchant over a girl barely out of childhood and a rancher who kept mostly to himself. The rain finally stopped sometime before dawn. Mason dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound, half expecting to hear horses in the yard or the angry shouts of a search party. But nothing came except the steady drip of water from the eaves and the distant call of an early bird testing out the morning. When gray light finally began to filter through the windows, Mason stood and stretched, working the kinks out of his back. He was 30 years old, not ancient by any means, but a night in a chair reminded him he was not a kid anymore either. He built up the fire again and started coffee, then began pulling out ingredients for breakfast. Bacon, eggs from his chickens, biscuits if he could manage them. He was no great cook, but he could handle the basics. He heard Anna stirring behind the curtain, then the soft pad of bare feet on the wooden floor. She emerged wearing his shirt, which hung past her knees, the sleeves rolled up multiple times. Her hair had dried into waves around her face, and in the morning light he could see faint freckles across her nose. She looked incredibly young and vulnerable, and Mason felt a fierce surge of protectiveness that caught him off guard. "Morning," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "Coffee will be ready in a minute. You like eggs? I can cook," Anna said quickly. "You have done enough already. Let me help." They worked together in companionable silence, Anna proving to be far more competent in the kitchen than Mason. She took over the biscuits entirely after watching him fumble with the dough, her hands moving with confident efficiency. By the time they sat down to eat, the cabin was filled with the smell of food and coffee, almost enough to make a man forget the trouble waiting outside these walls. "I have been thinking," Mason said as he poured them both more coffee. "You cannot go back to your uncle, but you cannot stay here either, not without causing a scandal that would make both our lives difficult." Anna nodded, staring down at her plate. "I know. I thought maybe I could find work somewhere else. Fort Bridger perhaps, or even head west to Utah. I can cook, clean, so I'm not afraid of hard work. A woman traveling alone is not safe. You know that." Mason ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "What about other family? Anyone who would take you in?" "No one. My mother died when I was 12. It was just my father and me until last year when the fever took him. Uncle Charles is my only living relative that I know of." Her voice was steady, but Mason could hear the loneliness underneath. He made a decision then that would change both their lives, though he did not fully realize it in the moment. "Then you will stay here. We will tell people that I hired you as a housekeeper. God knows this place could use a woman's touch. You will have the bedroom. I will sleep out here. Everything proper and above board." Anna looked up sharply. "You cannot do that. The talk in town would be horrible. They would assume things." "Let them assume. I stopped caring what most people in Evanston thought about me a long time ago." That was not entirely true, but Mason had learned that sometimes you had to pretend not to care until you actually did not. Besides, what is the alternative? You head off alone with no money, no horse, no supplies. That is not happening. You do not even know me. Why would you risk your reputation for a stranger? Mason met her eyes across the table. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because I have sisters back in Missouri. If they were ever in trouble, I would hope some decent man would help them rather than turn them away." Anna's eyes filled with tears and she blinked them back fiercely. "I will earn my keep. I promise you will not regret this." "I know you will." Mason stood and began clearing the dishes. "Now we need to deal with the practical matters. You need proper clothes, shoes that fit. Your uncle will have noticed you are gone by now. He might come looking." As if summoned by the words, they heard the sound of horses approaching. Mason held up a hand for quiet and moved to the window, positioning himself where he could see without being easily seen. 3 riders were coming up the muddy track that led to his cabin. He recognized Charles Kincaid in the lead, flanked by 2 men Mason knew by sight. Joe Brennan, who did odd jobs around town and was known for being handy with his fists, and Tom Porter, the deputy sheriff. "It is your uncle," Mason said quietly. "With Joe Brennan and the deputy. Get dressed in your own clothes best you can, and let me do the talking." Anna nodded, her face pale but composed, and hurried behind the curtain. Mason checked his gun belt, hanging by the door, making sure it was within easy reach. He did not think this would come to shooting, but he had not survived this long by being careless. The knock on the door was loud and official. Mason waited a beat, then another before opening it. He stood in the doorway, blocking the view into his cabin, his body language making it clear he had no intention of inviting them in. "Mason Steele," Charles Kincaid said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I am looking for my niece, Anna. I have reason to believe she may have come this way." Mason kept his expression neutral. "That's so. What makes you think she would come here?" "She ran off last night during the storm, half out of her mind, hysterical. I am worried sick about her." Kincaid's face was a mask of concern, but his eyes were cold. "Some of the neighbors saw her heading this direction. Your place is the only one out this way." "She did come here," Mason said, and saw triumph flash across Kincaid's face. Showed up at my door soaked from the river, scared out of her wits. She told me why she was running. The mask slipped. Kincaid's expression hardened. She is a disturbed girl. Her father's death affected her deeply. She makes up stories, dramatic tales. She needs to come home where she can be properly cared for. That is not what I saw. What I saw was a woman running for her life from a man who meant to do her harm. Mason's voice was quiet but carried weight. Behind him, he heard Anna emerge from the bedroom. She moved to stand beside him, chin up, wearing her own clothes despite them being only partially dry. "Uncle Charles," she said clearly, "I am not coming back. You know why. Anna, sweetheart, you are confused. Come home and we will sort this all out. No one needs to know about your little episode." Kincaid reached out as if to take her arm, but Mason shifted, blocking him. The lady said no. Tom Porter, the deputy, cleared his throat. He was a young man, newer to the job and clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Miss Kincaid, is there some kind of problem? Your uncle filed a report saying you ran away." Anna looked at the deputy directly. "My uncle came to my room last night drunk and tried to force himself on me. I ran because I was afraid of what he would do. I will not go back to that house." Kincaid's face flushed red. "That is a damned lie. She has obviously been out here alone with this man all night. Who knows what he has told her to say, what he has done to her. Steele, you will answer for this. Corrupting a decent girl, turning her against her family." "The only corrupting being done was under your roof," Mason said, his voice hard as iron. "And you know it. Now you have your answer. Anna is not going with you. You can ride back to town and tell whatever story you want, but the truth is going to come out." Joe Brennan finally spoke up. "Mr. Kincaid pays good wages to men who help him with his problems. Maybe we should just take the girl and be done with talking." Mason's hand moved casually toward his gun belt. "You are welcome to try, but I will tell you right now, I am a lot faster than I look, and I do not miss. First man who tries to put hands on that woman will be the first man to find out if I am bluffing." The tableau held for a long moment. Tom Porter looked between the two groups, clearly trying to decide what his duty required. Finally, he said, "Mr. Kincaid, if your niece does not want to return to your house, I cannot force her. She is of age and not accused of any crime. These are civil matters, family matters. You would need to go before a judge if you want to pursue it legally." "She is a liar and a whore," Kincaid spat, all pretense of avuncular concern gone now. "And you, Steele, are a fool if you think protecting her will do anything but ruin you. I have friends in this town. I have influence. You will both regret this." "Maybe," Mason said. "But we will regret it with clear consciences. Now get off my property." The three men turned their horses and rode away, Kincaid's back rigid with fury. Mason waited until they were out of sight before releasing a breath he had not realized he was holding. "He meant what he said," Anna said quietly. "He will make trouble for you. Then we will deal with it, together." Mason closed the door and turned to face her. "You did good standing up to him like that. I was terrified. Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." He paused, then added, "But he is right about one thing. People will talk. You being here, just the two of us. Some folks will believe the worst no matter what the truth is." "Then maybe we should make it the truth," Anna said, then blushed at her own boldness. "I mean not that. I mean maybe we should get married. A marriage of convenience. It would protect both of us. Give me a legitimate reason to be here and you would have a wife to show propriety." Mason stared at her, caught completely off guard. "You are suggesting we get married. We have known each other for less than 12 hours. I know it sounds crazy, but people get married for practical reasons all the time out here. I need protection and a home. You need someone to help run this place and to quiet the gossip. It could work." He wanted to say no. This was not how he had ever imagined finding a wife. He had always figured someday he would court some woman properly, take his time, build something real. But looking at Anna standing there in his cabin, still damp from her ordeal, chin raised in defiance against the world, he found himself considering it. "If we did this," he said slowly, "it would be a real marriage in name, but we would take our time with the rest. You would have your own space, your own choices. I would not pressure you for anything you were not ready to give, but it would have to be legal and binding. No pretending. I understand, and I agree to those terms." Anna held out her hand formally, as if they were sealing a business arrangement. In a way they were. Mason took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm that spoke of hard work, the slight tremor that betrayed her nerves despite her brave words. "Then I guess we better ride into town and find the preacher. The sooner this is done, the sooner you are protected by law as my wife." They made the trip to Evanston in Mason's wagon, Anna wearing her now mostly dry dress and a coat Mason had found that had belonged to his mother, left behind after a visit years ago. The town was bustling despite the mud from last night's rain. People stopped to stare as they passed, and Mason could practically see the rumors starting to spread like wildfire. Reverend John Michaels was in his church preparing for Sunday services when they arrived. He was an older man with kind eyes and a practical bent that Mason had always appreciated. He listened to their story, or at least the parts they chose to tell him, with barely a raised eyebrow. "Marriage is a serious commitment," he said when they finished. "Not something to be entered into lightly, even when circumstances make it seem necessary." "I understand that, Reverend," Mason said. "But I also believe sometimes God puts people in our path for a reason. Anna needs help, and I am in a position to give it. If that help takes the form of marriage, then so be it. And you, Miss Kincaid, you are certain this is what you want, marriage to a man you barely know." Anna met the Reverend's eyes steadily. "I am certain that Mason Steele is a good man who has shown me more kindness in one night than my own blood did in a year. I am certain that I want to build a life away from fear and men who see women as property. If Mr. Steele is willing to give me that chance, then yes, I want to marry him." The Reverend studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. I will need witnesses. Let me see if I can find some folks nearby who can serve." He returned a few minutes later with Martha Henderson, the schoolteacher, and Samuel Wright, who owned the feed store. Both looked curious but willing. The ceremony was simple and quick. Mason had no ring to offer, but he promised to get one soon. Anna's voice was steady as she spoke her vows, and Mason found himself meaning his own words more than he had expected. "I now pronounce you man and wife. Mr. Steele, you may kiss your bride." Mason looked at Anna, asking silent permission. She nodded slightly, and he leaned in to press a chaste kiss to her lips. It was brief, almost formal, but he felt a spark of something that had nothing to do with practicality or protection. They signed the marriage register, thanked the Reverend and the witnesses, and walked back out into the spring sunshine as husband and wife. On the way back to the wagon, they passed Charles Kincaid on the street. He stopped dead when he saw them, his face going purple with rage. "You married her." He sputtered. "You actually married that little liar." "I married my wife," Mason said calmly. "Mrs. Anna Steele. I suggest you remember that next time you think about spreading lies about her character. Slander against a married woman is slander against her husband, and I take that personally." They left Kincaid standing in the street and drove back to the ranch. The weight of what they had done settled over them gradually. They were married now, bound together legally and in the eyes of God and community. Two strangers who had taken a leap of faith into the unknown. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised them both with its ease. Anna threw herself into making the cabin a real home. She cleaned thoroughly, organized the chaos of bachelor living, planted a kitchen garden in the plot behind the house. She cooked meals that made Mason realize he had been merely surviving on food for years, not actually enjoying it. She mended his shirts, added curtains to the windows, brought wildflowers in from the fields to put in jars on the table. Mason found himself watching her as she worked, admiring the efficient grace of her movements, the way she sang softly to herself when she thought he could not hear. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was strong, resilient. She had been through hell and come out the other side still able to smile, still able to find joy in small things like a perfect sunrise or the first tomato shoots breaking through the soil. They talked in the evenings after dinner, learning each other's histories. Anna told him about her childhood, about a father who had been loving but distracted, always chasing the next opportunity. About her mother, a quiet woman who had taught Anna to read and sew and find beauty in everyday moments. About the grief of losing them both, and the betrayal of discovering her uncle was not the sanctuary she had hoped for. Mason shared his own story. Growing up in Missouri with 3 younger sisters and parents who had worked themselves to exhaustion on a farm that never quite prospered. The decision at 18 to head west, to find his own way. Years of hard work on cattle drives, saving every penny. The day he bought this land and knew he had finally found where he belonged. The loneliness of building something worthwhile but having no one to share it with. "I always thought I would have a family someday," he admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. "Kids running around, a wife who was my partner in this life. But the years kept passing and it never seemed to happen. Out here, there are not many unmarried women. And the ones that are available, well, we never seem to fit." "What about now?" Anna asked softly. "Do we fit?" Mason turned to look at her. In the fading light, her face was soft, open. They had been married for 3 weeks now, and in that time they had become comfortable with each other. But they had honored the terms of their agreement. He still slept on the chair by the fire, though it killed his back. She still kept to the bedroom. They had not so much as kissed since the brief peck at their wedding. "I think we might," he said carefully, "but I do not want to rush you. You have been through enough. You need time to heal, to feel safe. I can wait." Anna reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. It was the most intimate contact they had shared since becoming husband and wife. "You make me feel safe, Mason. From that first night when you pulled me inside and built the fire. You have never once made me afraid. That is a gift I did not know I needed." They sat in silence, hands linked, until the sky was full dark and the coyotes began their evening chorus in the hills. It was not a declaration of love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something real, something that went beyond the practical arrangement they had made. Summer came to Wyoming with blazing heat and long days of hard work. Mason's small herd needed constant attention. The fence lines required mending. Hay needed to be cut and stored for winter. Anna worked alongside him more often than not, learning to ride the gentle mare Mason bought for her, helping with the cattle when an extra pair of hands was needed. She proved to be fearless around the animals and surprisingly good with a rope. They fell into bed exhausted each night, Mason still on the chair, though Anna had begun suggesting he at least take the bed while she slept on the chair. He refused, stubbornly protective of her comfort. But the strain was showing. He was losing weight, his back in constant pain. Finally, one hot July night, Anna put her foot down. "This is ridiculous," she said firmly. "We are married, Mason. We live together, work together, eat together." The bed is large enough for 2 people to sleep in without even touching if that is what you are worried about. You are going to cripple yourself sleeping in that chair. Anna, I gave you my word. And I am releasing you from it, at least this part of it. She stood in front of him, hands on her hips, looking every inch the ranch wife she had become. I trust you. Come to bed. Actually sleep. We both need the rest. So that night, for the first time since their wedding, Mason climbed into the bed beside his wife. They lay stiffly at first, careful to maintain space between them. But sometime during the night, in sleep, they moved together. Mason woke just before dawn to find Anna curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, one hand resting over his heart. He lay very still, afraid to move and break the spell, feeling something crack open in his chest. He was falling in love with his wife. This woman who had come into his life soaking wet and terrified, who had stayed and become his partner in every way that mattered except one. He wanted to tell her, but the words stuck in his throat. What if she did not feel the same? What if she was only with him because she had no other choice? He could not bear the thought of making her feel trapped or obligated. Anna stirred against him, then went very still as she realized where she was. She tilted her head back to look up at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Good morning," she whispered. "Morning," he managed. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could feel it. "I should move." "You do not have to." They stared at each other for a long moment, something electric crackling in the air between them. Then Anna did something that shocked them both. She lifted her head and kissed him. Not the chaste peck from their wedding, but a real kiss, tentative and sweet and full of question. Mason responded without thinking, one hand coming up to cup her face, deepening the kiss. It was like touching a match to dry timber. Weeks of growing attraction, of careful distance and unspoken longing, went up in flames. They came together with an urgency that surprised them both, hands exploring, whispered words of reassurance and desire mixing together. Afterward they lay tangled together in the dawn light, both breathing hard, both a little stunned by what had happened. "I did not plan that," Anna said, her face buried against his shoulder. "I am sorry if I was too forward." Mason laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Never apologize for that." "God, Anna, I have been wanting to do that for weeks. I just did not want to push you." She raised her head to look at him. "I thought you were just being kind, that you did not really want me that way, that our marriage was only on paper." "Anna." He framed her face with both hands, making sure she heard him. "I married you to protect you, yes. But somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, with your strength and your laugh and the way you sing while you cook, with the way you are not afraid to get your hands dirty or speak your mind. I love you, not because I have to, but because I cannot help it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too. I think I started falling that first night when you gave me your bed and built up the fire, when you stood up to my uncle and made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth protecting. You have given me everything, Mason. A home, a purpose, respect. And now I know you love me. I do not have words for what that means." They made love again, slower this time, learning each other's bodies with the care of people who had all the time in the world. The sun rose fully, spilling golden light through the windows, but neither of them moved to start the day's work. For once, the ranch could wait. This moment was too precious to rush through. Eventually, hunger and responsibility drove them out of bed. They worked together to make breakfast, stealing kisses between tasks, unable to stop touching each other now that the barriers had come down. Mason could not remember ever being this happy. It felt almost dangerous, like the universe might notice and snatch it away. But the universe, for once, seemed content to let them have their joy. The summer passed in a golden haze of hard work and growing love. Anna's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables that she preserved for winter. Mason's herd grew, a few calves born healthy and strong. They made the trip to town together every few weeks for supplies, and slowly the talk died down. People began to accept them as a legitimate couple. Even those who might have doubted the circumstances of their marriage could not deny the obvious affection between them. Charles Kincaid remained a dark cloud on the horizon. He spread what poison he could, telling anyone who would listen that Mason had seduced his niece, that Anna had always been troubled, that the marriage was a sham. But most people in Evanston had known Kincaid long enough to recognize his character. The fact that his wife, when she returned from visiting her sister, quietly left him and moved in with her own relatives, spoke volumes. Whatever happened in that house, it was clear it had not been the safe haven Anna needed. Fall came with its riot of colors, the aspens turning gold and the air taking on a crystalline quality. Mason and Anna worked from dawn to dusk preparing for winter, cutting wood, finishing the preserving, making sure the animals were ready for cold weather. They fell into bed each night exhausted but content, wrapped in each other's arms. It was in October that Anna realized she had not had her monthly courses in almost 2 months. At first, she thought it was just the hard work and stress. But when the nausea started, when she found herself dizzy and overwhelmingly tired despite sleeping well, she knew. She waited until she was certain, then chose a quiet evening to tell Mason. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Mason reading an old newspaper from town while Anna mended one of his shirts. She put down her sewing and said, "Mason, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her tone made him put down the paper immediately. "What is wrong? Are you feeling ill?" "Not exactly ill, but I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." The emotions that crossed his face were too quick to catalog. Surprise, shock, joy, fear, wonder. "A baby, you are sure?" "As sure as I can be. I think maybe since August, which means the baby should come sometime in spring." Mason was on his knees in front of her in an instant, taking both her hands in his. "A baby," he repeated, his voice full of awe. "Our baby. Anna, this is the best news. Are you happy?" "I know we have not talked about children yet." "I am happy," she said, smiling through sudden tears. "Terrified but happy. I do not know anything about being a mother. What if I am terrible at it? You will be wonderful. You are wonderful at everything you do." He pressed his hand gently to her still flat stomach. "A baby. I am going to be a father." They spent the evening planning, talking about everything from names to how to convert the small storage room off the bedroom into a nursery. Mason was full of ideas, already thinking about building a cradle, about needing to increase the size of the garden, about 100 practical matters. Anna watched him with love swelling in her chest. This man who had taken her in as a stranger, married her to give her protection, and then given her his heart. Now they were creating a family together. Winter came hard and early that year. By November, snow was piling up in deep drifts, and the temperature rarely rose above freezing. Mason had prepared well, though, and they weathered the cold months in relative comfort. Anna's belly grew, and with it grew Mason's protectiveness. He barely let her lift anything heavy, insisting on doing the bulk of the indoor chores himself, even when she protested that she was pregnant, not dying. "I am not taking chances," he said firmly when she complained. "You and the baby are too precious." The isolation of winter brought them even closer. With fewer chores demanding attention outside, they had time to simply be together. They talked for hours, played cards, read aloud from the few books they owned. Anna taught Mason a silly song her mother had taught her. Mason showed Anna how to carve simple figures from wood. They made love carefully, tenderly, mindful of her growing body. It was a harsh winter, but inside their cabin it was warm in every way that mattered. They were building a life, a family, a future. Everything Anna had lost when her father died, everything she had fled from when she escaped her uncle, was being restored in a way she had never imagined possible. Spring arrived late, the snow not fully melting until April. Anna was huge by then, her due date approaching fast. Mason had ridden to town in early March to talk to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, one of the few female doctors in Wyoming, and a woman with a reputation for being excellent with childbirth. She had agreed to come out to the ranch when Anna's time came, provided the roads were passable. On a warm day in late April, almost exactly a year after Anna had shown up at Mason's door soaked from the river, the contractions started. Mason rode hard for town, his heart in his throat, and returned with Dr. Mitchell and Martha Henderson, who had agreed to help. The two women took over the bedroom while Mason paced outside, feeling completely useless. The labor was long and hard. Anna's screams tore at Mason's heart, making him want to break down the door and somehow take her pain away. But all he could do was wait, praying to a God he did not always believe in that his wife and child would survive this. Finally, as the sun was setting and painting the sky orange and pink, he heard a different sound. The thin, outraged wail of a newborn. Mason's legs nearly gave out with relief. A moment later, Martha Henderson opened the door with a smile on her face. "You have a son, Mr. Steele, a big, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but doing well. Come meet your child." Mason walked into the bedroom on shaking legs. Anna was propped up against the pillows, her hair dark with sweat, her face pale but radiant. In her arms was a bundle of blankets that squirmed and made small, mewling sounds. Dr. Mitchell was cleaning up efficiently in the corner, giving them space. "Come meet your son," Anna said softly. Mason sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face that was the most beautiful thing Mason had ever seen aside from his wife. Tiny fists waved in the air, already fighting the world. "He is perfect," Mason whispered. "You are amazing, both of you." "I want to name him Matthew," Anna said. "Matthew James Steele, after my father, if that is all right with you." "It is more than all right. Matthew James Steele." He tested the name, finding it good and solid. "Welcome to the world, son. Your mama and I have been waiting for you." Dr. Mitchell and Martha left after making sure Anna and the baby were stable, promising to check back in a few days. Mason and Anna were left alone with their son, staring at him in wonder, trying to comprehend that they had created this tiny, perfect person. The first weeks of parenthood were exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Matthew was a good baby overall, but he still needed constant care. Anna was recovering from the birth, and Mason tried to take on as much as he could. They stumbled through the learning curve together, neither of them having much experience with infants. But love covered a multitude of mistakes, and Matthew thrived despite his parents' uncertainty. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch work demanded attention. Mason hired a young man from town, Sam Cooper, to help with the heavy labor so he could stay closer to the house. Sam proved to be reliable and hard-working, and having the extra hands made all the difference. On a warm June evening, Mason and Anna sat on the porch watching the sunset, Matthew asleep in Anna's arms. The baby was 2 months old now, starting to focus his eyes and make cooing sounds that melted both their hearts. "You remember this time last year?" Anna asked. "We had been married barely 2 months. We were still figuring out how to live together." "I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive to have you," Mason said. "That has not changed. So much has happened. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life." That I get to wake up every morning with you beside me, with our son sleeping in the next room, on land we own. After everything with my uncle, I thought I would never feel safe again, never feel like I had a real home. Mason pulled her close, careful not to jostle the baby. You will always have a home with me, you and Matthew and whatever other children we might have. This is our place, our family. Nothing is going to take that away. I love you, Mason Steele, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. I love you too, you and our boy. You are my whole world. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. A year ago, Anna had been running for her life through a storm, desperate and alone. Now she was surrounded by love, holding the child she had made with the man who had saved her in every way that mattered. It was not the life she had imagined, but it was better. Real and solid and built on a foundation of respect and partnership and deep, abiding love. The years passed with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Matthew grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler, then into a boy who followed his father everywhere, eager to learn everything about horses and cattle and the land. 2 years after Matthew's birth, Anna gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret Rose, a tiny thing with Anna's green eyes and Mason's dark hair. 3 years after that came another son, Michael, who seemed determined from birth to challenge his older brother for dominance. The ranch prospered under Mason and Anna's joint stewardship. What had been a small, struggling operation became one of the more successful spreads in the area. Mason's reputation for honesty and fair dealing grew, and he began to be consulted on community matters. Anna became known as a woman of strength and competence, someone other ranchers' wives sought out for advice on everything from difficult births to canning techniques. Charles Kincaid remained in Evanston for several more years, his business slowly declining as word of his true character spread. His wife never returned, and eventually he sold the general store and left Wyoming entirely. Anna heard he went to California, but she did not care enough to track his fate further. He was part of a dark past that had led her to a bright future. She bore him no ill will, but no forgiveness either. Some things were beyond forgiveness. The children grew. Matthew proved to be a natural horseman, gentle with animals but tough when needed. Margaret had her mother's practicality and her father's stubborn determination, a combination that promised to serve her well. Michael was the charmer, quick with a smile and quicker with a joke, but also deeply loyal to his family. Mason and Anna grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered hard winters and dry summers, cattle diseases and market crashes, the death of friends and the joy of watching their children thrive. They built a life that was real and solid, full of hard work and simple pleasures. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Mason took Anna back to the spot by the Green River where she had crossed all those years ago. It was a warm April day, much like the day they had met. "I have been thinking," Mason said as they stood looking at the water, "about that night. About how terrified you must have been, crossing in the dark with your uncle chasing you." "I was terrified," Anna agreed, "but also determined. I knew I could not go back to that house. I would rather have drowned than gone back. I am so glad you did not drown, that you made it to my door, that you gave me the chance to know you." Anna turned to face him fully. They were both in their 40s now, lines showing on their faces, gray beginning to thread through their hair. But when Mason looked at his wife, he still saw the beautiful, fierce woman who had shown up soaking wet and changed his life forever. "You saved me," Anna said simply. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me shelter and safety and respect. You gave me love and partnership and children. You gave me a life worth living." How do I thank you for that? You thank me by being exactly who you are, by building this life with me, by loving me even when I am stubborn or difficult, by being the best mother our children could have asked for, by making every single day better just because you are in it. Mason pulled out a small box from his pocket. I know this is 20 years late, but I promised you a ring and I never did get you one. We were too busy surviving that first year, then building the ranch, then raising babies. But I have been saving and I finally found something worthy of you. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small emerald, the color of her eyes. Anna gasped, tears immediately filling her eyes. Mason, it is beautiful, but you did not have to do this. I wanted to. I wanted you to have something that showed the world how much I love you, how much I have always loved you. He took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her finger beside the plain gold band from their wedding. There, now you are properly married. Anna laughed through her tears and threw her arms around her husband's neck. I have been properly married for 20 years, but I love it. I love you. Thank you. They kissed there by the river, middle-aged parents of 3 with a ranch to run and responsibilities waiting. But for that moment, they were just Mason and Anna, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The ride back to the ranch was peaceful, both of them content in the comfortable silence of long partnership. As they crested the rise that let them see their land spread out below, Anna felt a wave of profound gratitude. The house they had expanded over the years, the barn Mason had built with his own hands, the pastures full of healthy cattle, the garden that fed them through winter. And inside that house, their 3 children, probably fighting over something inconsequential but safe and loved and growing strong. This was the life that had started with a desperate woman showing up at a stranger's door, soaked from the river. With a cowboy who had pulled her inside and built a fire, choosing kindness when he could have turned away. With 2 people who had agreed to a practical marriage and found instead a love that sustained them through everything life threw their way. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, a chaotic affair with Matthew talking about a horse he was training, Margaret complaining about her brothers being pests, and Michael trying to sneak extra biscuits when he thought no one was looking. Mason sat at the head of the table, watching his family with deep contentment. Anna caught his eye and smiled, that special smile reserved just for him, and he felt his heart swell. After dinner, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Mason and Anna sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were coming out, bright and sharp in the clear Wyoming sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Mason asked suddenly. "Showing up at my door that night? Marrying a stranger. This life is hard. You could have ended up somewhere else with something easier." Anna considered the question seriously. "I do not believe in easy," she said finally. "I believe in real, and this is the realest thing I have ever known. You, our children, this land. The work and the struggle and the joy all mixed together. No, I have never regretted it, not for a single moment. This is exactly where I am meant to be." "Me too," Mason said quietly. "You are exactly who I was meant to find." They sat hand in hand as the night deepened, 2 people who had taken a chance on each other and won everything that mattered. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound lonely and wild and free. Inside the house, their children slept safely. In the pastures, their cattle grazed. Around them, the land they had worked so hard to build a life on stretched out in all directions. It was not a grand life by some standards. There were no mansions or fortunes, no society parties or European tours. But it was a good life, honest and hard-earned and full of love. Matthew grew up to take over more of the ranch work as Mason's body began to show the wear of decades of hard labor. Margaret surprised everyone by developing a passion for breeding horses, turning part of the ranch into a successful horse operation. Michael eventually became a teacher in Evanston, but remained close to his family, bringing his own wife and children out to the ranch for frequent visits. Mason and Anna grew old together, watching their children become adults, welcoming grandchildren, marking the passage of time in seasons and harvests. They never lost the connection forged that first night when she had shown up desperate and he had chosen compassion. It sustained them through loss and hardship, and made the good times even sweeter for being shared. On a warm summer evening when they were both in their 60s, Mason and Anna took a rare moment alone together. The ranch was busy with children and grandchildren, the house full of noise and life. They walked out to their favorite spot, a rise overlooking the valley where they could see for miles. "You remember when it was just the two of us?" Anna asked, leaning against her husband. "Before the children, before the success, when we were just two people trying to figure out if we could make a marriage work. I remember thinking I did not deserve something as good as you," Mason said. "I kept waiting for you to realize you had made a mistake. I never thought that, not once. From the beginning, I knew you were someone special, someone worth building a life with." Anna turned to look at him fully. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, his body showing the effects of a lifetime of hard work. But his eyes were still the same, still looking at her with that mixture of love and wonder that had never faded. "I would do it all again," Mason said. "Every single moment, the hard parts and the easy parts, all of it as long as it was with you." "Me too," Anna whispered. "Always with you." They stood together as the sun set over the land they had built their life on, surrounded by the legacy of their love. 3 children who had grown into good, strong adults. Grandchildren who would carry their values into the future. A ranch that had started as one man's small dream and become a family legacy. And above all, a love that had started with an act of kindness and grown into something unshakable. The years continued to pass. Mason's health began to decline first, his back finally giving out after a lifetime of hard work. He moved slower, needed help with tasks that had once been easy. But his mind stayed sharp, and he took deep satisfaction in watching his children and grandchildren work the land he had built. Anna remained strong longer, caring for Mason as his body failed, just as he had once cared for her when she needed shelter. Their roles had reversed, but the love remained constant. She read to him in the evenings, helped him walk when he needed to move, made sure he was comfortable and surrounded by family. On a cool autumn morning, with the aspens turning gold outside the window and his wife holding his hand, Mason Steele passed away peacefully in the bed where 3 of his children had been born. He was 70 years old, and he died knowing he had lived a life of purpose and meaning. His last words were for Anna. "Thank you for choosing my door. Thank you for everything." Anna grieved deeply, but not bitterly. She had known from the beginning that their time was finite, that every day together was a gift. She remained on the ranch, cared for by her children, watching her grandchildren grow, telling them stories about their grandfather, and the night their grandmother had shown up soaked from the river and changed everything. She lived 5 more years, staying active and involved in ranch life until her own health began to fail. On a warm April evening, almost exactly 50 years after she had crossed the Green River running from her uncle, Anna Steele died surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last thoughts were of Mason, of the life they had built together, of a love that had started with a stranger showing kindness to someone in desperate need. They buried her next to Mason on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a big Wyoming sky. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates of their 2 short lives. But the real memorial was all around, in the ranch still operating, in the children and grandchildren carrying on their legacy, in the story that was told and retold of how a desperate woman and a compassionate cowboy had found each other and built something lasting. Matthew stood at his parents' graves with his own children beside him, looking out over the land his father had built and his mother had helped sustain. They had a great love, he told his oldest son, who had been named Mason in honor of his grandfather. The kind of love that most people only read about in books, and it all started because your grandfather chose kindness when he could have chosen safety. Remember that. Remember that one act of compassion can change everything. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of rain. In the distance, cattle lowed and horses called to each other. The ranch lived on, generation after generation, built on the foundation of a love that had started with a knock on a door in the middle of a storm and a cowboy who had pulled a desperate woman inside and built a fire to warm her. It was a simple story in many ways, but also profound. 2 strangers who became partners, then friends, then lovers, then the center of each other's worlds, who had taken a practical arrangement and transformed it into something that transcended the circumstances of its beginning, who had faced hardship and loss and the simple grinding work of making a life on the frontier, and had come through it stronger for being together. In the end, that was the legacy of Mason and Anna Steele. Not just the land or the children or the material success, though those mattered too, but the proof that love could grow even in the harshest soil, that commitment and respect and choosing each other every single day could build something unbreakable. That sometimes the best things in life started with an act of kindness, a door opened in a storm, a fire built to chase away the cold. Their story became legend in the family, told and retold, embellished in some places but true in the ways that mattered. The great-grandchildren who never met them still knew their names, still knew the story of how they came together. And on the ranch that bore their sweat and tears and love, their presence could still be felt in the wind, and the grass, and the good bones of the land they had built together. The house they had shared, expanded over the years, but still containing the original cabin where Anna had first found shelter, remained the heart of the ranch. New generations made their lives there, raised their children there, sat on the same porch where Mason and Anna had watched countless sunsets together. The bedroom where 3 babies had been born, and where Mason had taken his last breath, was treated with reverence, a reminder of the life and love that had filled these walls. And sometimes, on stormy April nights when the Green River ran high and wild, the family would gather and tell the story again. Of the woman who showed up at a stranger's door soaked from the river, terrified and desperate. Of the cowboy who pulled her inside and built a fire, offering shelter without question. Of how that single act of compassion had grown into a love story that spanned decades and touched generations. It was a story about second chances and finding home in unexpected places. About how the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best if we are brave enough to keep moving forward. About choosing kindness even when it is not easy or convenient. About building something real and lasting in a world that often feels temporary and fragile. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple and true. The kind of love that sustains and strengthens, that grows deeper with time rather than fading. The kind of love that makes all the hardship worthwhile and turns a simple life into something extraordinary. Mason and Anna Steele were not famous people. They never did anything that made the history books. They were just two ordinary people who found each other at the right moment and chose to build a life together. But in doing so, they created something that outlasted them both. A family, a legacy, and proof that sometimes the greatest adventures start with the simplest acts of human decency. The sun set over the Wyoming ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The wind carried the sound of children playing, of cattle settling for the night, of life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. And if you listened very carefully, you could almost hear the echo of two voices, young and hopeful and deeply in love, promising to face whatever came together, hand in hand, heart to heart, for as long as they both should live.